I'd like to welcome Minister Fitzgerald to the House. We're on item 26, motion 12 regarding youth work. Call on Senator Van Turnhout to move the motion.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome, Minister, to the House, and I move the motion. And I'd also like to represent the representatives of so many wonderful youth work organisations and the National Youth Council of Ireland to the Visitors Gallery. And before I begin this evening, Minister, I think it would be remiss if I don't wholeheartedly congratulate you on the recent passing of the children's referendum. I know that there's other issues ongoing, but I don't think it should take from the success. Many promised, you delivered, and so thank you very much, Minister. And Minister, I know you're aware I have a long list of issues that I'd like to be able to discuss with you in this House, but today I'm going to limit myself to the issue of the value of youth work. I stand here today as somebody who has personally benefited from my experience as a young person in a youth organisation. I was lucky to have some truly inspirational youth leaders. Indeed, I wonder if I didn't get involved in girl guiding, would I have the confidence to be standing before you today? And when I look at so many of the skills that I have, Minister, I can trace them directly back to my own personal experience in youth work. I've also had the honour of being President of the National Youth Council of Ireland several years ago, and through that experience I learned the value of providing young people with a choice of youth activities. Just like us adults, one size does not fit all. I tabled the motion a number of weeks ago in the hope that we could have a debate prior to the budget, and so I would like to thank my colleagues in our independent group for allowing me to use our precious group time to have the debate here today. We know that youth work makes a real difference in the lives of young people and the communities they live in. And the report that has been produced by the National Youth Council of Ireland, the Indicon report, on the assessment of the economic value of youth work, clearly demonstrates and provides hard evidence that youth work is also value for money and makes economic sense. And I have no doubt, Minister, that like me you were alarmed with the fact that Ireland has the fourth highest number of young people who are not in education, employment or training in the EU. You know, our percentage is 18.4%, which the EU average is 12.9% of the needs. If we look at marginalised young people, we know that 29% of young people under 25 are now unemployed. We know that a third of our young men aged 20 to 24 are unemployed. We also know we have a growing youth population with 18.4% of the population aged between 10 and 24. Along with that growing youth population, we also know from youth work organisations that they have an increase in demand, and perhaps that's a recession, Minister, that people are looking for value for money activities, but each youth organisation is experiencing an increase in demand in their services. And it is for that reason that I have tabled the motion today, along with my colleagues in the independent group, and I'd also like to thank the other senators who did add their signatories to the motion. Minister, the report clearly goes through the evidence, and I don't want to use up all my time going through the evidence, and I could give you the hard economic evidence, but I could also provide you many case studies. If we take, for example, let's just take one, early young teenagers who are regularly drinking in the fields behind the school where the youth work organisation meets, and how over a period of 2 years they're gradually encouraged to get involved in the activities of the organisation. Through gentle encouragement they realise the harmful effects of alcohol and cease hanging out in the fields because they now have a worthwhile activity to belong to. Or, Minister, you could take, for example, the 8-year-old who used to turn up to her youth work meeting half an hour early every week just to chat. It transpired that this young person had no active engagement with another adult from one end of the week to the other than this youth worker. You know, they had parents instructing them what to do, but nobody actually just chatted to the young person. The young person who has autism and finds any group activity painful and indeed frightening, and after 2 years of coming along with her sister to meeting, she starts to smile and progressively becomes more involved. Her mother says that the socialisation skills that she's developed were remarkable, and she directly attributed them to her youth work experience. Our Minister takes a teenager who, on a weekend away with the youth group, begins hitting the other participants and uses very sexualised language. After careful handling by the youth worker who talked with the girl and her parents, it transpires that this young person was being abused by someone known to the family and had to be reported to the authorities. Minister, I could continue with that list, and I didn't get that list from any report or any research. They're all my own personal experiences as a youth work leader with the Girl Guides. And I have no doubt that if you talk to any youth worker, anybody here who's in the gallery could give you a long list of examples of where we know that youth work makes a difference. So we have the economic report here that shows, but we can also say it makes a difference. I call them magic moments, and they happen. Sometimes you go to meetings, don't have a great night, but things happen like that you know it makes a difference. Minister, when I tabled the motion, I tried to put down an evidence-based factual account, and I was tempted to add lines of saying don't cut any funding, but decided to have a wording that was non-confrontational. And so when I saw the government amendment, I have to say I felt it was an attempt to gild the lily. The reality, Minister, is most youth work organisations have seen funding cuts over the past few years that have a cumulative cut of 30%. For some particularly smaller specialist organisations, they're going to be no longer viable. This will reduce the choice for young people of the type of youth organisations that they can become part of. And while most are finding that demand is increasing in youth work organisations, the demand is also increasing from the young people because they don't have the resources within their families. So a local youth work club has having even more pressures on its resources. Minister, I don't wish to divide the House this evening, so as a first step, in order to be constructive, I'm going to ask some questions, and perhaps, Minister, you can help us with some answers. And in addition, I'm going to add some of my own commentary, so the record of this debate can stand. The first point, Minister, I want to talk about is frontline youth work services. There are 382,615 young people participating and benefiting from youth work. There's 1,400 full-time people employed, but there's over 40,000 volunteers. So when we talk about frontline youth work services, for me, Minister, coming from a background in guiding and scouting, that actually means volunteers who are working on the front line, who are being provided resources and supports by staff. The staff are based in National Office, a very tiny, small staff are based in National Office, who provide and help with programme materials. They don't design the programme materials, they are done actually by the volunteers. So everything is done by the volunteers, but you need that backup support. So sometimes when I hear frontline youth work services, I wonder, is the true voluntary nature really understood? Minister, in your discussions with the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform in the lead-up to the budget, I do want to know, did you discuss the Indicon report on the assessment of youth work and the benefits that it clearly demonstrated? For me, the documents that were published by the Department of Public Expenditure on Budget 2013 show that the Department of Children and Youth Affairs is proposing another cut of £3 million next year. These cuts are unsustainable. And when I look at it, Minister, youth work funding is actually 14% of the overall budget of the Department of Children and Youth Affairs. And yet, if I look at the funding, it's talking about cutting 30% of the funding. So it's a disproportionate cut. And, you know, I do have to question that. Minister, in the government amendment to the motion under point 2 at the end, you talk about providing significant capital funding for the development of youth facilities. And this is really welcome. But I'd like to ask the Minister to clarify the exact funding, because last year there was an announcement made about capital funding in November 2011 of £1.5 million, capital funding for 2012. Then in November 12 there was an announcement of £500,000 funding for 2012 and £1.5 million capital funding for 2013. So is the total capital funding for 2012 and 2013 combined £3.5 million or £2 million? So I just trying to work out what the figure is. In addition, has the Department carried out an assessment to ensure the sustainability of these services? If a facility can be opened for only a few hours per week, I would question this expenditure. I think there is a great disparity in services being provided. In point 3 on the government amendment at the end, it talks about prioritising the protection of funding for frontline volunteer-led provision, and I've already mentioned what I believe means frontline provision. But Minister, I just want you to clarify for the House, when you're talking in this point, are you talking about the £1.035 million funding that is there for the local services out of the whole budget of £56.8 million? Because, you know, when I read it first...
Turnhout, you have 1 minute left.
That's fine. I read it first. I was excited, but I'm going to progress on. Minister, I have to ask about the National Youth Work Advisory Committee, who is being consulted. I saw the PQ by Deputy O'Quailon. What are the terms of reference? Reforming and rationalisation, Minister, I know that you're talking about doing a review. Is that the same review that was promised in the 2011 Comprehensive Review of Expenditure? When can we expect it? What are the terms of reference? School Facilities Minister, it's a pet bugbear of mine. The government tells youth organisations to rationalise. When are schools going to be opened up in the evening for youth work organisations to be able to utilise them? I see too many of them locked, and youth organisations are being charged money for other facilities in the community. In ending, Minister, just to say, we've had debates in this House on mental health, youth suicide, social inclusion, youth unemployment, bullying, alcohol-related harm, I can go on. And central in all of these debates was the valuable role that youth work organisations play. And that is why I passionately believe we need to be supporting these organisations and not decimating them.
Senator O'Donnell.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Thank you, Minister. I think, and I've spoken about this before, indeed you have yourself, Minister, we are constantly trying to adultify young people and adultify them through television and radio and video and music and comedy and language and the whole entertainment world. And we rush them into a kind of a glories of adulthood. All things adult means all things great. And we're sort of like fools rushing into a kind of adulthood because we consider it a good thing. And we actually consider it to be progress. And we forget that they are young and that they live in a different world and they expect different outcomes, have different